They weren't cheering for him anymore. They were watching him, to see if this would finally be the moment Joe Montana failed. The scoreboard said they were losing. The crowd said it was over, and the man holding the ball heard something worse than boos. Silence. Not the respectful silence of belief, the cold silence of people who had already moved on. On the sideline, helmets were coming off. Coaches leaned into each other, whispering. One of them shook his head slowly, the kind of shake that doesn't mean adjust the play, but accept the ending. Joe Montana stood near the bench, his hands resting on his hips, breathing steady. His jersey was dirty. His right arm hung slightly lower than usual. Everyone in that stadium knew what had happened earlier. The hit. Late in the second quarter, Montana had taken a brutal shot just after releasing the ball. Helmet to ribs, shoulder driven into the turf. For a moment, he didn't get up. When he did, he walked to the sideline slower than anyone wanted to admit. X-rays came back inconclusive. Painkillers were offered. The backup quarterback started warming up, and that's when the whispers began. He's not the same. He's done. He can't throw like that anymore. Montana heard them. Not clearly, but enough. By the fourth quarter, the game had turned ugly. The opposing defense smelled blood. They blitzed harder, hit later, talked louder. Every time Montana dropped back, a defender was already in his face. The previous drive had ended in disaster. 3rd and long. Montana forced a throw. It sailed. Incomplete. The crowd groaned, not angrily, but tiredly, as if this was exactly what they expected now. On the sideline, the offensive coordinator slammed his clipboard. "We can't keep doing this," he muttered. Someone else said it louder. "He doesn't have it tonight." Montana sat on the bench, staring straight ahead. No arguing, no protesting, no shaking his head, just listening. The head coach walked over, crouched in front of him. "Joe," he said quietly, so the cameras wouldn't catch it. "You tell me if you're good, because if you're not, we make the change." That was the moment. Not the hit, not the pain, not the score. That sentence. Montana looked up slowly. His eyes were clear, focused, almost calm, in a way that felt out of place. "I'm good," he said. The coach hesitated, just half a second too long, because in that hesitation was doubt. The crowd didn't hear the conversation, but they felt it. A low murmur rolled through the stadium. People stood, stretched, checked their watches. This was supposed to be the end of something great. Then the referee's arm went up. Ball back to the offense. Montana stood. As he jogged back onto the field, something changed. Not visibly. His limp was still there, the pain still real, but the way he carried himself was different, slower, deliberate, controlled. The opposing linebacker laughed as Montana approached the line. "You sure you want another one?" he said. "This one's gonna hurt worse." Montana didn't answer. He bent under center, placed his hands, looked left, looked right. The stadium was loud again now, but not with hope, with anticipation. Everyone expected a mistake, a sack, a forced throw, a final confirmation that the legend had finally cracked. The clock ticked. Montana called the cadence. The ball snapped. The pocket collapsed instantly. A defender broke through untouched. Another came from the edge. For a split second, Montana had nowhere to go. This was the moment the highlight reels were waiting for. This was where careers usually end. Montana stepped up, not back, not sideways, forward. He slid between two defenders, shoulders brushing pads, and released the ball without setting his feet. The pass cut through the air like a knife. Completion. First down. The stadium froze. No cheering yet. Just confusion. Montana jogged back to the huddle. No celebration, no fist pump, just a glance at the defense, the kind that says "I'm still here." The next play came faster. Snap, quick drop, hit as he threw. Completion. Another first down. Now the noise changed. People leaned forward. Coaches stood up. The defense stopped talking. Montana's arm burned. Every throw sent pain up through his shoulder and into his neck, but his face never changed. He wasn't throwing harder. He was throwing smarter. Short passes, perfect timing, no wasted motion. The drive kept moving, and then, with just over a minute left, the offense crossed midfield. The scoreboard still showed them behind, but something else had shifted. Something no stat could measure. Belief. The defense called a timeout. On the sideline, the same coach who had doubted him earlier stared at Montana in disbelief. "Joe," he said, almost laughing now. "What are you doing?" Montana took a sip of water, wiped his mouth. "Exactly what they said I couldn't." He walked back onto the field. 11 seconds remained on the play clock. Montana looked at the defense. He saw the coverage. He saw the pressure coming. He saw the window. A window so small most quarterbacks wouldn't even consider it. He smiled. And in that moment, with the injury screaming and the stadium holding its breath, Joe Montana made a decision that would either end the conversation forever or turn silence into history. The play clock kept ticking. 11 seconds. 10. Joe Montana broke the huddle slowly, as if time itself had decided to follow his pace. The defense was already shifting, disguising pressure, walking linebackers up to the line. They knew what was coming. They were coming for him. Montana stepped under center and scanned the field. 2 safeties deep, corners pressed. Linebackers creeping forward, just enough to threaten blitz, not enough to reveal it. A trap. The crowd was loud now, not hopeful, not confident, anxious. This was the kind of noise people make when they're afraid to look away. The receiver to Montana's right shook his head slightly. He was covered. The slot receiver glanced back, eyes wide, silently asking for an adjustment. Montana didn't change the play. 8 seconds. The opposing defensive end leaned in and shouted, "You won't get it off." Montana ignored him. 7. The center looked back one last time. Ready? Montana nodded once. 6. Snap. The blitz came from everywhere. Not one defender. Not 2. 5. The pocket disintegrated instantly. Helmets crashed. Pads collided. The sound was violent, chaotic. Montana didn't panic. He took one step back, then another, and felt the pain explode through his side. White hot, sharp enough to steal his breath. For half a heartbeat, his vision blurred. That was all the defense needed. A linebacker broke through clean, arms outstretched, aiming not for the ball, for the ribs, to finish it. Montana planted his foot. It hurt so badly, he almost went down. Almost. Instead, he twisted his torso just enough to create a sliver of space, and threw. No windup, no perfect form, just release. The ball left his hand at an angle that made no sense. Too low, too fast, too risky. The linebacker hit him a fraction of a second later, driving him into the turf. Montana stayed down. The stadium followed the ball. It traveled over the middle, threading between 2 defenders, who both reached, both missed. The receiver cut inside at the exact moment the coverage shifted. Catch. First down. The stadium exploded. Not cheers. Disbelief. Montana was still on the ground, clutching his side. Trainers rushed toward him, but he waved them off and pushed himself up. Slowly, carefully. The defense stood frozen, hands on hips, staring at each other. That wasn't possible, someone said, loud enough to be heard. Montana jogged back to the huddle, breathing hard now. His voice was calm but lower. "We keep going," he said. Same tempo. The coach on the sideline was screaming plays into the headset, voice cracking with adrenaline. "Hurry, hurry." The clock was running. No timeout. Montana lined them up again. This time, the defense backed off. Respect crept in. The dangerous kind. The kind that creates hesitation. Snap. Quick throw to the flat. Gain of 8. Snap. Slant. Perfect timing. First down. The drive was no longer about survival. It was about control. Every play Montana took a hit. Every play he got up a little slower. Every play the crowd got louder. 30 seconds left. The offense crossed into scoring range. Now the stadium was fully alive. People were on their feet. Strangers grabbed each other's shoulders. The same fans who had been silent minutes earlier were screaming his name, but Montana didn't hear it. He was counting. The defense called timeout. Montana walked to the sideline. A trainer grabbed his arm. "You can't take another shot like that," he said urgently. Montana looked him in the eye. "I don't need another shot," he replied. "I need one more throw." Back on the field, the defense loaded the box. They wanted to end it here. Force a mistake. Force a sack. Force a legend to break. Montana broke the huddle. He saw the coverage immediately. Man to man. Single high safety. One receiver isolated on the left. The window would be there, but only for an instant. Montana clapped his hands. Snap. The rush came again. Faster. Angrier. A defender grabbed his jersey from behind. Another dove at his legs. Montana stepped into the throw. Pain tore through his body. His arm felt heavy. Weak. He threw anyway. The ball hung in the air just long enough for doubt to creep in. Then the receiver cut. Separation. Catch. Touchdown. For a split second, the stadium was silent. The kind of silence that comes before sound hits like a wave. Then everything broke loose. People screamed. Helmets flew. Coaches jumped. The sideline erupted. Montana dropped to one knee, not in celebration, in exhaustion. His head hung low as the noise washed over him. The scoreboard flipped. They were ahead. The defense stood stunned, hands on hips, staring at the man they had tried to break. Montana rose slowly, chest heaving, eyes locked on the clock. Still time left, still work to do. Because what came next would define not just the game, but the myth. The stadium was shaking now, not from noise alone, from disbelief, from the realization that something irreversible had just happened. Joe Montana stood near the sideline, hands on his knees, chest rising and falling hard. Sweat dripped from his helmet onto the turf. His right side burned with every breath. The trainers hovered again, one hand already on his shoulder pad. "Joe, we can take you out," one of them said. "Defense just needs to hold." Montana didn't answer immediately. He looked up at the scoreboard. The lead was there. Barely, but there was still time on the clock, and time was dangerous. He straightened up, slowly, painfully. "I'm staying," he said. Across the field, the opposing quarterback jogged out, jaw tight, eyes locked forward. He had watched the entire drive from the sideline.
Every completion, every hit Montana took, and survived. Now it was his turn. The defense huddled quickly. The coordinator barked orders, arms slicing through the air. Nothing deep. Keep it in front. End this now. Montana paced behind them, helmet off, hands on his hips. He wasn't watching the ball. He was watching the clock. This was the part people forget. They remember the throws. They remember the touchdown. They forget the waiting. First play, short pass, completion. The crowd groaned. Second play, another completion. First down. The noise turned anxious again. Montana slipped his helmet back on. The opposing offense moved faster now. No huddle, no hesitation. They were hunting field position. Montana stood next to the defensive coordinator. What do you see? The coach asked. Montana didn't look away from the field. They're going middle, he said. They think we're scared of the sidelines. The next play came. Middle route, almost exactly where Montana had pointed. Tackle. The coordinator looked at him sharply. Another play. Same look. Same formation. Montana stepped closer. They're setting up the out, he said. 2 plays. Sure enough. The next snap. The quarterback rolled right and fired toward the sideline. The ball sailed just a bit too far. Incomplete. The crowd erupted. Now the clock was the enemy. 30 seconds. The opposing quarterback wiped his hands on his towel. He looked calm, but his eyes gave him away. He was rushing now. Not physically. Mentally. Snap. Pressure. The pass came out late. Deflected. 4th down. The stadium held its breath. This was it. The kick. The field goal unit ran out. Long distance, but makeable. The kind of kick that lives forever if it goes through, and never leaves you if it doesn't. Montana stood still. The kicker set the ball. Took his steps back, looked up. The snap was clean. The kick was high. The stadium followed the ball into the night sky. For a second, it looked perfect. Then the wind caught it. Just enough. The ball drifted. Wide. No good. The sound that followed wasn't a cheer. It was an explosion. Helmets flew into the air. Coaches jumped. Players screamed. Strangers hugged. Montana closed his eyes. Just for a second. Then he exhaled. The final seconds ran off the clock. The officials raised their arms. Game over. Montana didn't celebrate immediately. He walked to midfield slowly, each step measured. His body finally allowed the pain back in now that the danger was gone. The opposing linebacker, the same one who had mocked him earlier, stopped him. Respect, the man said quietly. Montana nodded once. On the sideline, the head coach pulled him into a brief embrace. They said you were finished, the coach said, voice shaking. Montana smiled faintly. They always do. Later in the locker room, reporters crowded around him. Questions came fast. How bad was the injury? Did you think about coming out? Was this the toughest drive of your career? Montana sat down, peeled off his gloves. I wasn't thinking about my career, he said. I was thinking about the next throw. Someone asked the question everyone wanted answered. What changed tonight? Montana looked up. The silence, he said. When people stop cheering, you learn who you are. That drive would be replayed for years. Broken down frame by frame. Praised as clutch. Called legendary. But what never made the highlight reels were the moments before it. The doubt, the whispers, the assumption that it was finally over. Joe Montana heard all of it. And with 11 seconds, a battered arm, and a stadium ready to move on, he didn't argue. He didn't explain. He just made history.